Hello and welcome to this our current edition of the Academies Trust Handbook and Accounts Direction overview. I can't believe it's a year since we formed or televised our previous version. I suppose a lot has changed in that year, but equally we're now coming up to Academy season of audits again, and I'm sure everyone's looking forward to a smooth audit this year, I'm sure. I'm joined today here by Becky Foy, one of our senior managers, covering off various different client types, including being a specialist on Academy audits. So if we make a start with the introduction, please. So what are we covering off today? Well, we're going to start with the Academy Trust Handbook. You'll notice the 2023 version. Always to avoid confusion, that is effective from the 1st of September 23. So it will be the next year's audit year, I suppose, if you look at it that way. And then we'll move on to the Academies Accounts Direction, the 22-23, which is the document that governs the statutory accounts that will be prepared to 31st of August 23. Okay, so an introduction of the handbook. Now, I suppose here, not much has changed over the last, well, definitely over the last 5 years. Before that, perhaps it had changed more significantly. But we are seeing year on year now that the document is being fine-tuned rather than wholesale changes. So what is the handbook about? Well, it gives the conditions that the academies must comply with. Lots of that comes from the funding agreements that are in place, also various other ESFA and statutory documents. Who is it relevant to? Well, members, trustees and governors, accounting officer, finance officer and governance professionals. I'd also say it's an important document for your auditors. A lot of the regularity work that's carried out is based on the handbook and the musts that are appendix to it or feature throughout it. So it's clearly an important document for all involved in academies. I suppose before we get into the detail, each year there is a foreword that's put together by various government officials. This year, Baroness Baron, and I suppose it sets the scene. It was interesting to see in the first couple of paragraphs of the foreword, it covered off the fact that academies have now been in existence for 20 years. I think the first academies, I believe, under a Labour government, if I remember correctly, were very different from the academies we see today. Probably the real push started from the Academies Act 2011, which sort of saw the floodgates open and let the academy sector really growing in quantity, but also in substance and legislation, I suppose. So what was the messages put across as part of this summary? Well, the reiteration of the importance of the very best education experiences. A number of places they mention collaboration, working with steering groups and so on, which at James Cooper Creston we are part of. And it also goes on to talk about the right balance and support of autonomy and oversight, which academies have always toyed with, is the idea that you do have a lot of autonomy, but there clearly has to be some oversight too. The summary goes on to mention that the intention over a period of time is to move the Academy's Trust Handbook to a more shorter and more simplified document. The wording they use is shortened and sharpened, which I thought was quite a nice term. I suppose it's debatable whether that has been achieved this year. I'm always slightly dubious that each year it's tweaked, and usually more words than fewer words. So it's hard to see how you end up in a position where it's more concise. But I think as a poll, it would be useful to see the audience's opinion on whether it is actually shorter or more concise. So if we could run the poll now, please. So do you think the Academy Trust Handbook 23 is more concise and easier to read? 3 possible answers there: yes, no, not sure. So perhaps if we can launch that poll now, that'd be really, really useful. Okay, I suppose we'll give it a few more seconds so that everyone can get their answers in. and hopefully we can give the answers to it. So interestingly, most people feel it is, or close to a majority, 50% do feel that it's more concise. That's good to see. Some still think it is not particularly concise, and others are not sure. Interesting to see, and perhaps it would be interesting to see people's views towards the end of this this summary to see whether it is something that is becoming more concise over a period. Okay, thank you. So back to the slides, and perhaps onto the next slide. So the overview, again, probably not too much new here. What is the Trust Handbook about? It allows you to see what your statutory responsibilities are as an academy, where you need ESFA approval. It's based on a number of foundations and principles set out by the ESFA, including the 7 principles of public life, and it's also broadly built on the funding agreement. So I think we can move on from there. Next. So I'm sure you will remember in the past there's a series of musts and shoulds throughout the documents. Musts, non-compliance is most likely a regularity breach. So it's clearly areas that you do need to comply with. Should is really around best practice, good practice, and then there's a clear steer that you should be doing it, albeit non-compliance, as long as you have a appropriate safeguard in place, or you're mitigating the risk via a different means. Probably wouldn't lead to a regularity position. So just interesting to just list out the definitions there. Next page, please. So again, the Trust Handbook has a similar format. Each of those bullet points is effectively a different section, and we'll cover off some of the changes now over the next few pages in each of those sections. Interesting to note that the musts have now been summarised in a handy Excel document that you can get off the ESFA website, which might make it easier for Academy Trusts and auditors to perhaps check compliance. Next page, please. So what has changed? Starting with roles and responsibilities, clearly an emphasis on the importance and value of good estate safety and management. We'll have all seen in the news the current rat crisis and some of the issues that are coming out and are being very well publicised across the media. Not intending to go into too much detail here on that, but I think it's interesting to see the handbook was already starting to fine-tune some of the responsibilities in that area. You do wonder if they could see the issues on the horizon, and I'd expect this will continue to tighten in the area of good estate safety and management. One of the other changes is confirming that the board should have sufficient knowledge to hold executives to account. So here, I think some of it is two-way, really. It's making sure that the board have enough information, i.e. financial data and so on, to hold individuals to account, but also making sure the board composition and skills mix is appropriate, that they do have financially minded people on their board, as well as non-financial, whether it be HR, legal, and other, to make sure that there's a good breadth of knowledge. And in terms of composition, something that has been well written about, looking at the composition of a board, I think it's probably well known that slightly older individuals tend to take up board positions, particularly trustee volunteer positions. How trusts over a period of time can help attract younger, perhaps more diverse individuals to the board. There's also a change in terms of confirming that the accounting officer and financial officer should be different people. I think most were aware of that and were certainly implementing that. But it's now very clear that they should not be the same individual. If you were intending to run a dual role, you do need to get prior ESFA approval. Next page, please. So moving to the main financial requirements, there are a few changes here as well. There's no longer a requirement to disclose in your accounts if the trust meet fewer than 6 times. So you can take that section out of your accounts. A slight change to the budget forecast return, which there's been changes over the last couple of years, really, and it's now been extended out by a month, which I would imagine will be a welcome position for most finance officers. and also simplifying the position of the preparation and circularization of management accounts. Not too much has changed there, but just a reminder. Management accounts should be prepared monthly. They should be full, i.e. P&L, balance sheet, cash flow, and they should be shared with the chair. Next page, please. There's a little bit of clarification around gag pooling. I think most have been aware that this has been permitted for a number of years, and many larger trusts and medium-sized trusts do pool their gag resources. But just making it clear that there does need to be appeals processes in place and structure to ensure that it's fair for all schools and all pupils within the trust. There's also been quite a lot written around the approval thresholds for related party transactions. There has been an exemption around other educational providers, i.e. colleges and so on, further education entities and so on. So that there is an exemption there now, and the 20k threshold has been increased to 40k, and it's made it clear that that is per transaction rather than cumulative. So again, I think some welcome clarification in that area. Next page, please. So moving to notification to improve, what used to be financial NTIs but was changed. There's now probably a little bit more guidance in terms of what circumstances could lead to a notice to improve, helpfully split down into two sections: financial reasons and governance reasons. So hopefully it gives trusts a bit more of a steer of the areas that the ESFA are placing the most importance on. Next page, please. Okay, so we're over to the accounts direction now. Now that was a whistle-stop tour through the Academy Trust Handbook. As I say, not too many changes this year, fine-tunes rather than wholesale changes. So I'm pleased to hand over to Becky now, who's going to talk you through the accounts direction and some of the changes that have been presented in the latest version. So Becky, over to you, please.
Thank you. So yeah, now moving on to the Academy Accounts Direction, as already noted, this covers periods ending 31st of August 23, so the financial year we're going into now. The direction this year does not introduce any new requirements, but has provided some better clarity of the existing requirements. And then as per the prior year, the document is still made up of a mixture of the Companies Act and FRS 102, the Charities Act and the SORP, and then specific ESFA and funding agreement requirements. So now we move on to the next slide. We can look at some of the specific changes. So the first one is clarification on how trustees should use the direction. It's noted that the trustee should make themselves familiar with the accounting concepts and principles to help fulfill their responsibilities. But it did note the trustees aren't expected to have a detailed technical understanding of accounting requirements, but they should know when to seek additional support from relevant sources. There was then also some clarification on interim arrangements and absence of key signatories. This was more of a reminder that the Board of Trustees should ensure that there is adequate cover in place in the event that a trustee or an accounting officer resigns or takes a leave of absence. It should be noted that there is a government's requirement to have an accounting officer in post at all times, and therefore the trust really does need to consider a suitable replacement if the situation were to arise. And then finally on this slide, there was some updated feedback on non-compliance with the direction. The ESFA notes that it is the trustee's responsibility for ensuring compliance with the financial reporting framework and to ensure the accounts reflect performance in the year. The ESFA highlighted examples where information had been considered irrelevant or inaccurate. And the common themes noted were text directly copied from the model accounts and not tailored to the trust, or text that had not been updated from the prior year. So when updating the trustees report, there should just be kind of a thorough review to make sure everything is relevant for the current year. Moving on, please. And then, as already briefly noted, in the handbook, the direction also provides guidance on school building safety. it has been noted that within the review, the money statement and the statement of regularity, additional narrative should be included on estate safety management, and also suggested that the accounting officer should consider how they've effectively used relevant funding to ensure the estate is safe, well maintained, and complies with regulations. And then updated guidance on treatment of loans. Nothing huge to add here, but there is clarification which requires all amounts owed by trusts to be included under the creditor balance sheet heading at their settlement amount, which has been defined in the direction as the amount that the trust expects to pay to settle the debts. So nothing else to add there. So moving on to the next slide, please. And then looking at just the last couple of points for the 23 changes. One of them is the disclosure to material income streams. The ESFA still remains the largest source of income to the trust, with GAG being the highest income stream. Per the model accounts, this was already required to be disclosed separately in the notes to the financial statements. The ESFA now reminds the trust that all other material sources of income now need to be disclosed separately. They have noted that any non-material income streams can be disclosed together, but we probably will now be seeing the income notes being a bit more extensive than they were in prior years. And then finally, there was some clarification on categorising teaching assistants in the staffing notes. So the staff costs and numbers in the financial statements are required to be analysed between management, teaching staff, and admin and support. So the ESFA has now clarified that within the admin and support headings should include all other staff that do not have day-to-day duties, of which they have clarified that this would also include teaching assistants. So that was all of the changes in the accounts direction this year. So handing back over to Darren.
Okay. Okay, thanks very much, Becky. So again, I suppose as a summary, not too many changes in the accounts direction, which I think just shows the steady state that we're in now. Really it's fine-tuning again. So it's an interesting place we currently sit. So I suppose just to sort of wrap up, final few slides, what important documents are there? Well, there's the Academy Trust Handbook, the schedule of requirements, the musts, as we've said, are now in a useful Excel document. The Academy's Accounts Direction, now for a couple of years, has been split into 3 documents, perhaps making it slightly easier depending on the different users and what is important to you, but all available on the ESFA under a quick Google search. Good practice guides is something the ESFA are still pushing, and it's useful to look at, and sometimes that's where they feed additional information between each trust handbook release in terms of perhaps their direction of travel and thought process. And also letters to accounting officers just again gives the direction of travel and what the ESFA are focusing on, which I'd encourage you to read, and I think is actually a requirement at board level to review and discuss. So please make sure that is part of your annual cycle of agenda item points. So over to the next slide, please. So we've reached the end today. So in terms of, again, useful links, you've got our website, you've got our benchmarking report. Most of you will be aware that each year we are part of the Creston Academies benchmarking report. So the next one that we will publish will probably be first week in February 24, and that will be based on the 31st of August 23 accounts and some of the useful benchmarking data that comes out of that. As well as the data, we also try and include some of our thoughts in terms of the emerging issues within the sector and what could be on the horizon. Again, the accounts direction handbook and the useful links are added there. So I suppose that brings us to a close today. If anyone does have any questions, please feel free to contact myself and Becky, or contact your usual contact at James Cooper Creston, and we will endeavour to help you as much as we can. So I will just finish by saying thank you very much for attending and listening today. I hope you found it useful, and good luck in the coming audit season. Yes, I suppose that's it from today. Thank you very much. Take care, everyone. Bye.